Hey everybody, Brandon here, welcome back to another tournament game analysis video. Today we'll be covering round 2 of the Mississauga Spring. I ended up drawing in my first game, and that was against someone who was over 100 rating higher than me, so I was pretty happy about that. And now I'm playing against Ethan, who's about 50 points high rated as well, so we're up for another challenge. I'm playing with the white pieces here, and I start off with e4. We see e5, knight f3, knight f6, and, well, I wasn't expecting the Petroff, so that was difficult. Immediately I had to change my mindset because I don't really have the most robust preparation against the Petroff. It's just, it feels like a lot of the lines are like, okay, you take on e5, you can play like knight f3, or you can play d4, or you can play like knight c3. It all feels like so equal. I end up taking on e5, d6, and I just try like a little bit of a different line here. So the most popular moves here, I played something a little less common. Knight f3 is the most common move by far. Knight c4 is also up there. Knight takes f7 is actually more common than my move. I played knight d3. And I thought this was interesting. The idea is that instead of putting my knight on f3, I might put it on f4, and we're probably going to reach some sort of endgame eventually. So, yeah, that's actually not far off from what happened. So, knight takes e4, queen e2, queen e7, and I play knight f4 with some ideas of knight d5. They could play knight c6. There's a lot of complications in there. Knight c6 is an okay move as long as they meet it with knight d4. But they played knight f6, and I was happy about that. We should get like some sort of pull in the ending here. So I play knight c3, just normal developing. They play c6, I play d4, and again I'm just hoping that they try to avoid a trade. Something like this would be bad because now I have d5 and things actually start to look a little messy, and this is actually better for white. White has an advantage here, like a straight up advantage. Instead they take, and again I'm not too upset about that. Their idea here is that bishop f5 can be played. I just play bishop d3, completely neutralizing their threat on c2. I should defend the pawn, there's no reason not to. They take, I take, and now they play knight bd7. I play bishop f4 just to get on the diagonal before they can. Like if they could play d5 and bishop d6, then I'm sure they'd be happy. They end up playing knight h5 here. And now I play bishop e3. So originally I was thinking of bishop e3 or bishop f4. But I thought that if they play knight h5, I'm actually kind of happy to see it. Just because the knight feels like slightly misplaced on h5. It feels like they're going to have to waste the move on knight f6 at some point. So they play d5 here. And again, if we just like compare the positions, so if I go back and I play bishop e3, there's also knight g4, which is annoying. But let's just say they play like d5 here. It's the same position, but their knight's on h5 instead of f6, and I thought that h5 is just more vulnerable. That was my idea there. I play bishop e3, d5, I castle long. They play bishop d6, and then I play rook h1. They can't really take on h2. This would be a mistake because bishop f4 check, at the very least, is going to be good enough. Or we just pick up h2. But they castle long, of course. I play h3. I don't really have to, because I always have g3 or rook h1 as a move. But I decide h3, because I might play g4 as well, just gain some space. We see rook d e8. I end up playing g4. I don't think this is the right move, actually. Knight e2 is supposedly better. And lines could go like knight here. And now g4. And the big thing is now we're in time to play a move like bishop f4. And it's a little bit more comfortable for us to play. But, okay, the reason why g4 might not be as good in the main variation is because it's just like a tempo down. And if we try something like knight e2 here, we might get hit with h5, which we're not really quite ready to deal with in a comfortable way. Alright, so knight f6. I play f3 instead here. So if h5, maybe I just take back. They play h5. And then I started calculating, and I thought that g5 was interesting. Not really that great, though. Bishop f4 is better. This is also something that was on my mind, and then takes, and then we enter a position like this. I was worried about g5, though. And rightfully so, because now they can play moves like rook h3, and it feels like we're on the backside here. So that's no fun. So I played g5 instead. Knight g8, and then bishop f4. They end up taking, which is definitely a good idea here. And then they played knight e7. Yeah, I was curious if anything about f6 was interesting. Oh, sorry, no. I was curious about rook takes e8, rook takes e8, and then f6, but I just couldn't really make it work for them. Turns out, yeah, this is actually pretty good for us now because they're misplaced. And also, actually, just to go back here, knight g8, I was actually thinking knight h7, and I was wondering what would happen here, as I wasn't really sure. h4 is a little uncomfortable because they can reroute to g6. They don't even have to worry about, like, bishop g3. Well, there's always bishop f2 as a response, but they can just get to g6, and this feels good for them. But going back here, they go knight e7. I never want to play h4 to defend my g5 pawn, because then it's just a pure weakness after knight f5. Like, h4 here just doesn't make any sense at all. Black, honestly, it feels like black's going to win this game now. And yeah, it is actually winning. So instead, I go king d2, which isn't really that great. I should play knight ce2 instead. And if knight f5, I should go fully passive with knight g2. And I think the idea here is now we can finally get away with h4, for example, because the knight's on g2. This feels extremely passive, though, and a little unnatural. I just went king d2. I thought this was fine, because I'm just going to go like king d3 if I need to. Knight f5. King d3. Now we see g6. Knight g2. b5 and knight e2. So now I'm looking to reroute this knight to f4. But also I'm keeping the idea of maybe c3 in the cards. It feels like the knight had to move. There's also another idea of bringing the knight to c1 and b3 to target c5. My opponent played knight b6, and I'm happy to play b3. This feels like really important to play, just to prevent their knight from doing anything with knight a4 or knight c4. They play a5 now. I played knight ef4, which was my idea, mainly with knight e2 to f4. And then king d7, preparing a potential trade. I play c3 here. Maybe not fully necessary. Like we could consider actually taking, but I like c3. And then a4 was played. And this is where I make kind of a silly move. I play king d2. This felt really unnecessary because I was just preparing for a potential trade on the diagonal. But actually, I should play king c2. There's actually a big difference. Why is that? So with king c2, we're closer to b2. But in the game, when I play king d2, now they can take, and then go rook a8, and I can't play king b2 in time. If I could just play king d2 to b2, then it feels pretty comfortable. This is still fine. But we're giving them unnecessary activity, and it feels like they're going to infiltrate and cause some problems. Just ask some questions. Doesn't mean they're winning or anything, but they could definitely ask some questions here. So I go rook e2, which is actually losing. They have this really strong move b4, which is really hard to deal with because it's just undermining d4 and weakening our structure. This is an extremely good move for them, but also easy to miss. They end up playing it, actually, by the way. Instead here, of rook e2, I should play like knight e3. And this is just aimed to prevent any b4 stuff. And if they give a check, we actually just go knight c2 now. And now b4 is a little bit less of a nuisance because we have knight d3 as a response. And this, like we can bring our king to c3. And we can also, you know, we're like threatening knight e5 check. We have knight c5. We're getting a little bit more activity here than in the game. But rook e2. b4. Now I go knight e1. And then they go rook a2 check, which I wasn't super upset to see. I go knight c2 here. King d3 was maybe better. I thought knight c2 was more promising though. But that's okay. And after knight c2, we see rook b2. And now I'm happy. This actually felt like a mistake. And it actually is. So if they continue on with, funnily enough, a move like knight c8, this is actually really difficult to deal with. I cannot take on b4 because they take on d4. Knight d3. And now they can take, king takes, and then they can play a move like knight d6, for example, looks really strong here. With knight b5 check, just threatening to win the d4 pawn. And even if they lose the f7 pawn, this just doesn't really matter because... Actually, no, my apologies. The f7's defended. But now we have to make a move, and knight b5 followed by taking on d4 is going to come. So, yeah, the king d3, knight b5. This is an example of where they can just give up the pawn. And it just doesn't even matter because they just have too many threats here. So actually, best move is rook b2, which is funny. Not even going for taking the pawn immediately or anything, because the problem is we can just take back and we're defending our rook. But now there's some problems. So if I go b4, there's rook b3 check and f3 falls. And all of a sudden, they switch from trying to take advantage of the d4 pawn to actually taking advantage of the third rank. Okay, so rook b2. And now I'm just in time. I can play knight d3, and I can start rerouting my pieces as well. They go b takes c3, king takes c3, rook a2. I go knight e5 check, and now it feels like I'm actually pushing because f7's going to fall. And yeah, sure, d4 could eventually be a thing to worry about, but not anytime soon because they have to play knight c8 to d6 to b5 to do anything with this pawn. And they're just way too far from making that before I take f7. This is about equal, but it does feel like we're pushing. King c7, knight takes f7. And then they blunder here. They have to find knight c8. They have to find this idea of bringing the knight over to d6 here. And for example, for rook e6, they're just okay with rook takes c2, knight takes d4, and knight takes e6. But they played rook a8, and now we get in. So rook e6, there's no rook takes c2 anymore. Rook f8. I play knight e5, attacking c6. Knight h4. And then I take on c6. King b7, and I was so close to playing rook f6 here, which actually does win as well. But rook takes b6, and my opponent ends up resigning here because now the game's over. We just won a piece. We're going to play rook f6 next move to neutralize any activity they did have. And of course, if they take it, the knight d7 check wins their rook. And this is too much material. We're going to win. Just to show a sample line takes. If they take on f3, we can take on g6, take on g5. And actually, we just have like h4 here to defend the pawn. We can just bring our other knight over to win the h5 pawn if we want to. It's a full piece up, and we'll eventually just pick off all the pawns, and this will be a win. And that is how the game went. I hope you guys enjoyed. This was an interesting one. There was some mistakes in the endgame there, but I luckily was able to defend. There was, again, a point after rook e2 where I was just lost. If I can find that moment here. Yeah, rook e2 here was actually just losing for me, but I was lucky enough to just find a little bit of something here to end up coming back and end up turning the tides, especially after 95 check, which is annoying to deal with. Because again, if you move into the file and the view of the rook just to defend f7, then other things will fall instead. So you kind of have to play like king c7 and allow f7 to fall, which is not fun. But we can't really get in quite yet. Rook e6, again, there's this rook takes c2 problem. That's going to cover it for this game. Hopefully that was interesting. I am now on a 1.5 out of 2 score against both high-rated opponents, which is nice. Hoping we can continue that streak with game number 3, but we'll have to see how it goes. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye.